we get stuck when it comes to actually sharing what's important to us. We get stuck when it comes to connecting very deeply and vulnerably with other people. And then in the same moment, like this voice in my head said, Elisa, you have to change. And I realized that is who I truly am. I'm created in the image of God.
Hi, Elisa. Thank you so much for joining on the show, Moments with Masters, and you are the master of the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elisa. And before we dive into our conversation, I would love to introduce you to my audience. Elisa is a mindset and high performance coach, certified business consultant, and marketing specialist. She is also host, coach, and trainer on Mindvalley's certified business coach and accelerator programs, and works with hundreds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and coaches every year who are committed to being the change, not just talking about it. Elisa was contributing editor on The Leader and the Coach, authored by the godfather of coaching, Steve Chandler, and former NASDAQ CEO, Will Keeper. She is passionate about elevating leadership and company culture and helping purpose-led companies to achieve more growth, impact, and revenue. She also runs women's circles and speaks on service, purpose, and spiritual principles. Elisa's own journey into consciousness began soon after having her daughter. With a checkered past of abusive relationships, financial struggles, and people-pleasing, she realized she would have to change in order to become the role model she wanted to be for her daughter. Elisa lives in the UK with her husband and two small children. Welcome, Elisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Ranjan. And as you were reading that back to me, something that occurred to me, how that moment with my daughter was so humbling for me. And I realized that's the quality that I really admire in you. For me, you are a humble servant. Like, you serve, but with such humility, and I admire that quality so much. So I'm so pleased to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Elisa. And yes, that's one of my declarations. I'm humble gratitude.
Amazing. Yeah. And the fact that you're like, I can pick that up from you. That means that you're being that.
Yes.
Which is amazing. Something I need to learn more of.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Elisa, we all have our pasts and we all learn. There is something important that I create in my workshops and my trainings and my coaching. I call it turning points. That there are many instances, many points in life which you can call your turning points. And they are just more than one, not just one. But when was it the first time ever that if you go back in your past, you would call that as your turning point, when you started looking within and started aligning with your authentic self?
Yeah. And that's funny, because I was going to say my daughter, but another memory just came to me that feels like it was a real turning point for me. And when I was growing up, my mum, I was very, very shy. I was probably the shyest kid that I'd ever met. And I think, and really, what is shyness? And I love what Steve Hardison says about this. And I think I read it in The Ultimate Coach, but I'm not sure. He said that one of his clients came to him and, what should I do about my daughter, who was very shy? And he said, love the shyness out of her. I often think that, because as a child, I was so shy. And what do I need to do for myself? That's what I've been doing. I've been loving the shyness out of me. But despite being very shy, I had a mum who was an absolute social butterfly. And she was always putting me forward for things. So I was the shyest kid on the planet, painfully shy, always being put forward for things. And when I was about I don't know, I'm thinking about 16 years old. My mum worked at the Baha'i National Office in London, so they often got requests, and they had a request come through for a young person to come and speak on their hopes for the future at an event in London. And this was a very big event held in one of the Westminster halls. I'm not sure which one. I can't remember. I was kind of too young to gather that. And then they had representatives from all different religions, political backgrounds, business. And they had asked young people to come up onto the stage. For example, like the Archbishop of Canterbury was there. And I think there were about maybe 300, 400 people in the room. And so my mum asked me, would I do it? And I remember, even though I was absolutely terrified, because I believed in what they were asking for, young people's hopes for the future, I remember knowing that I had to do it, or if I didn't do it, I would never do it. Like, this was my chance to push myself and grow. And so I wrote my speech, and I remember I spent a long time writing my speech. And then when the day came, I was sat in the front row with all of the other young speakers, absolutely terrified. And I was hoping that I would be last, but they did it in alphabetical order. So because Baha'i was the first one, they called me up first. And I remember I went up there with my piece of paper with my speech. And I stood on the, on the area to speak. I put my speech in front of me. And I almost couldn't get the words out. But then I got the first few words out, and then suddenly something else took over me. And it was like, I don't know what it was. If it was, another power, or essentially my ego was beginning to leave. My ego was being humbled in that moment. And I began to speak. And because I believed so much in what I was talking about, I just suddenly started to love it. I loved it. I loved talking about what I was talking about. I loved being up there. I loved seeing people's faces. And I feel like that was a real turning point for me. We all have a voice, right? We've all been given this toolbox as a voice. But so many of us, we get stuck here. We get stuck comes to actually sharing what's important to us. We get stuck when it comes to connecting very deeply and vulnerably with other people. Yes. It stops here. It's like it's in our heart, and we desperately want to share that with the world, but we don't. And I think, I'm so grateful for that opportunity that came my way, because it was definitely one of those turning points for me where I realized that, I have a voice and I can use it for good, for spreading good, for sharing good, for connecting with people. So for me, that was definitely a turning point. And I'm glad that memory just came back to me as well.
That even brought back my memories of my childhood. Elisa, I had I don't know how to describe it, but I had a struggling childhood. I was always compared with the toppers of my class. I was always compared with the richer in my class, and I was always compared, and I was always expected to be like them. And well, I was always ranking number 3, and there were always 2 people, and I still remember their names, always above me, number 1, first ranker and second ranker. I was always the 3rd or the 4th ranker. But it was like it was taking away my sense of worthiness, and it was like attacking me psychologically. And I was like, I fell into this trap of trying to prove myself that I am worthy of love, I am worthy of attention. And then it just happened that there was some speaking contest at my school, and I don't know, like I was actually forced. My name was just added like that without my permission by my seniors.
Right.
And then I came back home and I was terrified, and I didn't know, like, what do I do now? I have to go. So I think the next day I had a speaking contest, and I was trying to find excuses to excuse myself from the school and stay absent from the school. And my dad somehow identified that something's wrong, and yes, he asked me, like, what's happening, why don't you want to go to school? And I said, tomorrow there is a speaking competition and I'm scared. I don't know how to. And that's exactly when my dad never went to school, and but then he knew how to create me. And he said, so what, see, I'll be your audience, and let's start the practice. And he took me to one of my teachers' home nearby and said, my son will be speaking tomorrow, and I request you to write a small talk for him. And he sat with me for about 45 minutes. He wrote down something, and we came back, and my dad sat there and he said, half the job is done. This talk is ready. And now it's just you need to get ready. And I practiced it. And when the next day I spoke, that is where I realized that, yes, I love speaking. I love standing in front of the audience. And this is who I am. This is my zone. This is my domain and my territory. And I think I remember from that year onwards, in all the contests throughout my schooling, I was the top speaker. But then it helped me, bring back that confidence, that natural conviction of that there is something that I'm built for, designed for, and that is why I am given this. And I feel blessed that I identified that, and I got this opportunity to connect with my strength, my natural strength. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Elisa.
Thank you for sharing that as well.
Elisa, how, I see that, this is taking you back to one of your 2-3 social posts that I followed, and I really wanted to talk to you about this, about the distinction of what you have done in the past and the truth of who you are. I would love to listen your insights on this distinction.
Sure. Well, for at least 10 years, I created myself daily as a failure. And this was all throughout my 30s, really, because in my, well, not the whole of my 30s, 20s and 30s, because in my 20s, early 20s, I had a few things happen, but essentially I had a breakdown. I'd had to sell my house because I had massive financial struggles. In this breakdown, I got into an abusive relationship. And after I came out of that, life very quickly changed for me, and got a lot better. For example, I started a business a few months later, did very, very well. I got married, found a lovely husband, had a family. But even still, I was constantly creating myself on a daily basis from my past. And I really felt that I had wasted what should have been, in my mind, the best years of my life, right? Your 20s, everyone says 20s, they're the best years of your life. You're going to enjoy them, blah, 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 blah. And for me, they were hell. They were hell on earth.
I resonate there. I too experienced the same. Yeah.
No, they were hell on earth. And, and every day I would kind of think, how can I was supposed to have everything kind of going for me, right? I had brains, I had ambition, I had all of these things. How is it that I got myself into such a bad situation? And logically then concluded it must be because I'm a failure. Like there's something wrong with me. And so I was constantly creating myself from this place unconsciously for a lot of it. But then when I really had this moment not long after having my daughter, and I'd come out of the shower and my little daughter was on her bouncer on the floor, and I remember, like, and in the shower had been triggered by these past memories, and feeling how I normally felt on a daily basis, full of shame, full of self-disgust, and anxious, and all of these things. And I remember looking at her and thinking, oh my God, how do I stop her going through that? And then in the same moment, like, this voice in my head said, Elisa, you have to change. Like, that's how you stop it. You become the role model that you want to be for her. And so that really set me off on a very much more conscious path of creation. And really, that's when I realized how much I'd been creating myself on a daily basis as a failure. I'd been creating myself from the past, rather than thinking about who it is that I am. And I think so many of us, we believe that we're our past failures. We believe that we are the things that people told us, the bullies at school, or a teacher that was unkind, or, all of these kind of things. We believe that that is who we are. And I realized that I had to get very, very conscious about who I actually am. And where I found the clues and the breadcrumbs to who it is that I actually am is through reading holy books and spiritual books, and seeing, I think it was Ernest Holmes that said this, God created everything, right? He created the universe and everything that is good. And if God created everything, when he created you and I, and anyone watching, the only thing he had to make us was out of himself, right? Because he is everything. And therefore we are created in the image of God.
Yes.
And I realized that is who I truly am. I'm created in the image of God. And I'm going to say this, it's almost like disrespecting to our creator to believe that I'm a failure. It's the ego wanting to exert itself and tell me I'm a failure. But, I want to pay as much respect to my creator as I can. And for me, that means recognizing who the creator is and recognizing that I'm created in that image. So, and I think that's really important for everyone to recognize that you're not a culmination of what you've been through in the past. You're not a culmination of the mistakes that you've made, or, the failed relationships, failed businesses, poor decisions. We've all made so many of those. But when we can kind of wind those back and apply forgiveness and compassion, all of which are qualities of the creator, forgiveness, compassion, kindness, when we can reflect that back on ourselves, then we become, by default, because we're practicing those qualities, we become by default who it is that we are. Compassionate. I'm a compassionate human being. I forgive. I sacrifice. I serve. We have to kind of turn these things on ourselves sometimes, and practice. I believe that when we practice self-compassion, self-forgiveness, we are practicing it on everyone. I love what Byron Katie says about there is no self and there is no other. That in itself is an illusion. And for me, this gave me a whole, when I read this book from Byron Katie, that's in A Mind at Home with Itself. It's one of my favorite books. But when I read that, it gave me a whole new understanding on unity. What is unity? Oneness. The oneness of mankind is actually not tolerating others. Sorry, I know I'm going off on a little tangent here, but it's recognizing our oneness in that there is no self and no other. That's an illusion. So when we practice compassion towards ourselves, actually we're practicing compassion towards all of humanity. So I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but yes, but recognizing who it is that you truly are. It's important for our growth. It's important for everyone's growth who is around us, because when we practice that, we give life to others. I think we breathe life into others.
Very truly said, Elisa. This is about embracing your true self.
Yeah.
And it's like falling back into yourself from that chase game and the outside in perception of who you are. And I call it like owning your story and letting go of your past and creating the future from the past that you create again. You recreate. And I still remember that, I was during my young years, I was working for very meager salaries, and I was not believing in all that I had created even before that. But then there was a crisis. I started struggling. I started believing in these messages which were being pumped from the outside world, telling me that you're not good enough, you're not rich enough, you're not strong enough, you're not educated enough, you're not qualified enough. And I started believing that, oh yeah, but I forgot that even before that, I had created things which people never dared to create. I had done that, but I forgot them. And I started creating my story from the messages which were coming from outside. And I still remember I was sitting at a reception of a local small diagnostic center. I was working there as a receptionist for a salary which would now be like maybe $4 or $5 a month. So imagine what I was doing that in the beginnings of the last of 1998 or 1999 kind of thing. So imagine, it was very less. But then before we lost everything, I had lots of books with me, and I loved reading books. A surprise that happened is that I came across this book. I was reading this, and I bought this because I could afford it. And I bought this book called Tough Times Never Last, But Tough People Do by Robert Sculler. And also the reason I read this book was because it was actually a speech given by him for the unemployed youth. And I loved the book. The book was about idea management. And that's when I realized that life is an idea. You create it and then you live it. And I just sat there. I couldn't believe that life is an idea. And how could somebody say that? It's a reality for me. I am struggling. My family is struggling. And how could somebody call it an idea? And I decided that I'll explore the veracity of this book, the truthfulness in this book. And I said, okay, let me put this book to a test. And I decided to put my doubts and self-doubts aside and just follow what the author says. And I said, okay, if this is true, I want to become a published author by next year in 12 months. All right. And I'm saying this when I had zero money in my pocket, and we are struggling even to, have food on the table. And I said, okay, now I knew that this is not possible. So I created this. And I did exactly, I trusted, I created faith, and I followed exactly everything that was there. You won't believe, in just 7 months, I wrote this book and got it published in my native language. And I just found some topic and I just started writing on it, not because I wanted to become an expert on this subject, but because I wanted to see whether it's possible. And it turned possible.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, oh my God, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. I love what you did there as well. You just saw it as an experiment. You weren't thinking, this guy is wrong or this guy is right. You were just like, okay, let's just see if this guy is right and treat it as an experiment. So you went in with that playfulness, which is, I think, such a lovely, light attitude to do it with.
Yes. I would go back to every page. I would underline things and then see how I can execute them. That's right. I followed that with faith. Uh, Elisa, you're a marketing specialist, and this is again inspired from one of your conversations. Like, what's holding people in the business world, and what would be your message for the business leaders to create more of success and abundance for their business?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big question, but I think that I think that one of the things that in the West, for example, the West is like a beautiful lampshade, right? It's had so much money put into this lampshade. It's carved. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. But the West is like this beautiful lampshade without any light,
Mm,
right? It's such a materialistic society,
mm,
and I think that I'm sure that other cultures are different, but definitely, I grew up in England, right?
mm,
It's a very secular country. And this kind of notion that we can be our whole selves is not is I think it's an emerging idea in especially in this culture. But there's definitely this big barrier between kind of being your whole self and business. It's
mm,
almost like in business is just mechanical and robotic, but we forget that business is run by people.
mm.
And we as people, we're multi-dimensional. Yes, we're like physical beings, but we have this amazing mind that we can tap into. But we also have this soul that's moved and stirred by beauty and service and meaning. And that is what I would really like to bring into business, is that business is not this mechanical thing, but business can be something where everybody profits,
Mm.
not just like, and again, so much of business is run by some people profit and a lot of people
Exactly,
suffer. Yeah,
the red ocean strategy, and a kind
yeah,
of a cutthroat competition where you ought to, your success depends upon how many people you eradicate in this journey,
yeah,
how many people you crush on your way to success, and how many
yeah,
people you
yeah,
defeat. The focus is on defeating our competitors than creating what you
yeah,
actually want to create, which is
yeah,
actually a blue ocean strategy. And people think this is an abstract idea. You can't have business as well as a holistic a holistic approach towards business, because
yeah,
the fundamental belief now is that people, business owners especially, believe that business is about numbers, and business is about money, and business is about profits. So it is something like more of a system that you put in place, but there is no talk about the soul in the system, the spirit in
yeah.
the system.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that once we begin to have this, so there was a quote that really helped to shift a lot for me around money, because I grew up in a very working class culture, not well off at all.
Mm,
And these things can really affect your mindset around money and what's possible. And I remember reading maybe a year ago a quote which was from Abdul Bahar, and he said that wealth is most praiseworthy provided everyone is wealthy. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, right, that's a really big thing. Maybe it's not good to be wealthy. And then I thought, no, 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 no. A much better question to ask is, okay, how can we make everyone wealthy? And I
mm,
think that that's the kind of questions that as humanity now we should be asking as business leaders. How can our business that we have, how can we profit more people? And I don't
yes.
just mean profit in terms of money, I mean profit in terms of health, abundance of all kinds. But I think that we are one world now. There used to be a time when we were separated, but we're not now. We're one world, and we need to start thinking in terms of the human race rather than our individual nations and our individual companies. And how can we begin to build something that benefits everyone? And that's not an impossibility. That's just a mindset shift. That's asking, who do we need to be? to create something that benefits everyone? Who do we need to be to create something that benefits our staff more? And this makes sense from a business point of view as well, right? When your employees are happier, they're more productive. When your employees have a purpose, when they feel purpose and meaning in their work, they're more engaged with it. And in fact, people are willing to take less money because they're getting meaning and they're able to contribute. They collaborate more because there's a vision that's more than just them. It goes outside of them. So I think that as businesses, that we can begin to think broader. How can we, it's an mindset. How can we benefit and help everyone else benefit as well? And I think that's the way the world is going to go. I would just like to help companies go there faster.
Fantastic. Elisa, two things that I'm also passionate about, and which I see that you also are passionate about, are marketing and culture. And these two I see is, I've been thinking over it for a very long time. And the way I approach marketing is marketing is service. Marketing is putting your message out and aligning that with the problems that people have, and how you can solve them, and how you can serve them, and how you can create opportunities for them to see you and to align with you. And on the other side, culture, you very rightly said, culture is, I call, the soul of the organization. Culture is the context that you create around what you actually are building inside the organization. It's not about the product. People don't just buy the product, and even if they buy, they can see through your eyes. They can see through how you're working, and the experience of your product also. It becomes so noticeable through everything that you are doing, whether it's your customer service, whether it's your sales reps making calls and talking. It just shows. And where does that come from? The point is, it comes from the existing culture. And this is something like, unless you align these things, and unless you have your employees purpose aligned with the vision of the company, and unless everybody knows what they're doing there and why they are there, and how being there and working with this company is actually helping them evolve and actualize their potential, probably there's no meaning, because it just becomes mercenary. It just becomes you're getting paid, and that's why you're just investing your day there to get the money out of the company. And if that happens, it's like, it shows in your marketing messages, it shows in your sales conversations, it shows in your customer service, it shows in your implementation, it shows everywhere. And then the business leaders struggle to identify, people. It's not about people responsible. It's not people's accountability. It's about how you are even addressing the foundation of where the product is being built from. And it is actually being built within the culture, inside the culture, which is around that. And the culture is coming from the mindsets of the people who are operating there. And how do you help business leaders create this awareness on, or how do you educate business leaders in your process of coaching, Elisa? I would love to learn from you.
Sure, thank you. First of all, I love what you said about how culture is the soul. That's just a brilliant marketing line, but also it's so true. It's such a wonderful way to describe it. It's, like you say, you can have a fantastic product, but if the soul is not there, why are people going to be attracted to it? And okay, so how do I help? So much like you, Ranjan, I work on leadership and culture first. What is culture? It's really what is the purpose for which we are doing this? And when that vision, and we need leaders with big visions now. We need leaders who are going to ask the and question. How do we create something that's better for humanity? And when we have this, I think people are naturally attracted to it, because, and this is the soul speaking. The soul is looking for, the soul is in a natural state of service, right? I think it always wants to serve. It wants to serve others. And we know it makes logical sense that when we serve others, we also benefit, When
Absolutely.
we help others rise, we all rise. It's old world thinking to have this competitiveness, to think that I need to cut other people down in order to move forward, to excel. This is old world thinking. It doesn't work. That's why, and we know it doesn't work, because the world is full of problems right now which need to be solved. And it's not going to come through the same level of thinking that created the problems.
And business and I'm sorry interrupting, but you rightly said, and
please.
business and entrepreneurship is about solving problems.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is.
Please, please go ahead.
Yeah. So we can't have the same level of thinking that created the problems. We have to begin to think differently. And I think this thinking of, well, what's missing? And as you so beautifully said, the soul is missing. What is it that people are attracted to? What stirs the soul? And it's meaning. Everyone is looking to contribute their skills and talents, unconsciously or consciously. Everyone is looking to contribute their skills and talents in a way that benefits themselves and others. And when you have a company that taps into, okay, so how are we benefiting ourselves and others? What can we do? How can we make our vision broader? How can we make it bigger? How can we begin to include all of our staff and our community in which we live? How can we begin to affect that? How can we begin to affect humanity as a whole? And I don't mean that you have to have an international company. I mean that anything you do where in your mind you're thinking, how can I better humanity, even if you've just got a little coffee shop.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
The very fact that is your intention means that you're already beginning to shift and change the way you think, the way your staff thinks. And this is the culture that's created. And it's one of service, where service means service to oneself and service to others, because you no longer see the barrier between the two. The two things are one and the same. So, and I think that some companies are, and leaders are naturally, like, they're naturally there. They're a little bit more in touch with their heart and soul. And then I think for them, it's just about, okay, like helping to kind of solidify these concepts or the desire that they have. And then how do you just practically execute that? How do you filter that out throughout a company? How do you make sure that everyone in your team is aligned with the vision, for example? How do you make sure that that your team members, what their visions are for their own lives, and make sure that, again, that they're aligned with the company vision? So, it's a great fit. How do you ensure that each department is being the vision and being the company values? These are the things where real change happens, when you begin not to just look at the doing, but you begin to look at the being. Okay, as a marketing department, how do we be our vision? How do we be our values, whatever that is? The purchasing department. And when you begin to shift into that, I think first of all, people's well-being increases.
Absolutely.
Because now we're just more in touch with everything that's going on. Collaboration increases because you're all doing it for a common purpose. There's this element of competition and trying to get one over the other, which has been it's not just been in business, it's been in human patterns of behavior for a very long time. But as a human species, we always want to seek to grow and progress. And this is our natural, I think that this is our natural way of being, is to collaborate, to love each other, to work together, to benefit each other. It makes sense. It makes sense from a business point of view. It makes sense from, of course, that's going to bring more prosperity. More joy at work. You're going to get things done faster because you're aligned with the vision. Like, anything that's outside of the vision can go. Like, you're more productive. You have more time. You have more time to be creative, to solve these big problems. So I think that there are leaders who are already in this kind of level of consciousness. They maybe just need a little bit of help. Okay, right, how do I do that? How do I execute that in my company? What would that look like? And that's what I bring is that structure to it, in terms of of how to do that.
Fantastic. I was listening to, I think, some podcast just 2, 3 days ago where some one of other international experts were sharing that most of the employees these days are like, they leave back their souls at home while commuting to their workplace. And it's like, when they leave their office to go back homes, it's like they are recreating their soul before they reach their home. And if this is the kind of people that you bring, how could you expect these people to do everything that they can do for the business? Because a thriving business is a result of a thriving culture, and a thriving culture is a result of a thriving mindset that exists there. And a thriving mindset is not something that just happens by itself. It has to be created, it has to be put in place, and it has to be created systematically, and it has to be executed. And imagine, even 10 leaders of a startup, of a business, transformed and connected with the vision of the company. Imagine the impact that it would create on the business. And on the other side, imagine every employee of your company being a brand ambassador of your product, of your service, and but it takes the courage to understand that this is not something abstract. This is so real, and it's as real as water to a fish. A fish doesn't realize that it's actually in water unless it's taken out of the water. And that's what is happening. We are in the culture, and we don't see it because we are it. We are it, and everybody is it. And unless that context changes, it will be a dictatorship kind of leadership, and it wouldn't be an organization where their teams are working, where teams are collaborated, where teams are committed, and where teams are creative, and where teams are thriving at an individual level. And that's exactly why the conversations are different, the language is different, the creativity flow is different, everything is different. But that happens when, as you said, it is put in a structure, and then everybody is involved to co-create it, and that is how it happens. But what's been your experience with working with companies or business leaders, Elisa? My experience has been that it is the business leader, it is the business owner, it is the C-suite people who have to realize this, because change comes from there, decision making happens there, and it is for them to realize that this is not an abstract. And this is, most of the companies I've worked with, I feel that the leaders think that this is not for me, because I'm the investor and I am the business owner. This might not be for me. This might be for my team leaders. But then what happens between the business owner and the team leaders? That also is an important part to be aligned in developing a vision, shared vision, and to create results. What's been your experience, Elisa, in
So I have to say that one of the best examples that I have experienced personally of this is working with EverCoach. So EverCoach is Mind Valley's coaching arm. And I've been working with them for just over about a year now. And I have to say that I feel like they're such a good example of this, because, for example, the company's values are service, love, and care. And you see that in everything, like the team that I work with the CEO, I work with his second in command, which is the learning designer. And then some of the other team, it's a small team. I think the company turns over, I might get this totally wrong, but I think the company's turning over about 20 million. And there's a core team of only 8. And they're all over the world. I think there's only 2 of them who are in the same country, right? So this is an amazing example of a company that's able to attract the best talent
Mm.
from across the world and remove the barriers of of distance, remove the barriers of even money sometimes, but attract the best talent. And that's because their vision is so clear, that they live their values. There is such integrity in the CEO is Ajit. There's such integrity in the leadership. There's such
I
integrity.
grew up, my childhood was at a place very close by to Ajit's place in
Oh, was it?
Rajasthan.
Was it? Oh, okay,
Uh,
amazing. I
uh,
have been to Rajasthan actually.
yeah, I grew up in Sirohi. It's a place in Rajasthan, which is close to
Amazing.
Ajit's place.
Yeah, yeah. But
Uh,
he is a like no one's perfect. No
mm,
one is
mm,
perfect. We should never expect anyone to
yeah.
be. But he is humble. He shares what his past difficulties were. He
Mm,
shares what he struggled with. He shares what he's learning at the moment. So there's no kind of barrier between the old way of doing things, and so many of us, so
mm,
many leaders, like you said, when we're thinking about changing, it's a conscious creation, right? it
yes.
it has to be conscious. This is exactly what you were talking about. How do I consciously, if service is our value or if love is our value, how does that consciously apply to a customer that's complaining about something? How do
Mm,
we live that value in that circumstance? You have to consciously create it, because otherwise what happens is, as we talked about earlier, you're creating from the past. And so many of us know leadership to be dictatorship, authority, distant. You don't really know them. They're your boss. You don't question anything. Fear. This is how leadership has been done in the past.
mm,
None of which, all of which comes from the ego, all of which comes from fear, but none of which is conducive actually to real progress, to
yes.
thriving in a company. So I have to say that EverCoach for me is one of the best examples that I have personally experienced, being in a team that genuinely cares. Like, we all genuinely love each other. The communication is excellent. There's no sense of competition whatsoever. There is a mission, and we're all in it, and we give ourselves completely to the students or anyone on the certification programs. They get the fullness, like when I host the certified business coach program. And so these are business leaders from all over the world. Some of them are coaches, but they all have a business background. Some of them work in large companies. We start we call it a lab, where they practice what they're learning. We start every lab with a meditation every single week. And it's for people from a business background, sometimes they find this a little bit weird to begin with. It's not normal. It's not done in the business world. It's almost like we have a fragmentation. We've created this separation between
Mm.
who we are in our normal life and what we
And what we
value,
do.
and at work.
Yeah,
It's like there's this
exactly.
barrier. We can't cross it, and this barrier only exists in our mind. So how do we begin to break it? And it's by doing stuff that it's a bit shocking to people, like starting a business coaching lab with a meditation, but they absolutely love it. And they can see the benefit of being present. I say this so often, but how much value would it add to a company if, when they met as a board in the boardroom, everyone was completely present? Because otherwise what happens is what they're doing is they're sitting in a meeting that they're already mad or angry. They don't want to be there. They're mad with so-and-so sitting across from them. They're bringing in all of this baggage from the past. And that's what's occupying a lot of their consciousness. Or they're
Yes,
worried. I'm worried
yes.
about my department. I'm worried about what's going to happen. I'm worried, like, now they're projecting fear onto the future. But hardly ever are they completely present.
Present.
But nurturing this quality of presence in a boardroom, where there is no past, there is no future. We have this amazing opportunity in front of us to solve this particular problem. And that's all that is present, and they're fully present, and they're thinking about it, not just from their intellect, but from their heart and their soul as well. You know, all of this is being brought forth to solve this problem. This is when I think we're going to create absolute magic in businesses, and to have businesses that really progress humanity and do humanity justice. You know, we're like humans are such a beautiful race. Like we're just such a beautiful race. And I think it's time we just stepped into that. We really lived who it is that we are. We really lived this beauty, and we use all of our talents and our skills and our mind and our intellect and our inspiration and our soul and all of these things to see how can we keep getting better? How can we keep making the world better? How can we solve new challenges and problems that are coming along? And I think when we do that, this world is going to change very, very quickly, radically. And I think business leaders have such an opportunity to do that because, as you so rightly said, business is about solving problems.
Very true, Elisa. And this radical transformation is possible when the business leaders realize that it's about having courage to be vulnerable, and having courage to be open to listen, and having the willingness to learn, and just be humble in the process of learning, instead of coming from that shallow self and ego that since I am the boss, you will have to just do what I ask you to do kind of things. And that's what differentiates the culture of dictatorship versus the culture of creation. And you know, I was talking to Karan Rai from our Being Group, and one of the clients of Steve Hardison, and I was talking to him about a month ago, and we were having a long discussion, and he shared with me his journey of how he created himself as an entrepreneur. And he said, in the process of this 1 month or over a month, Ranjan, do you know what I was doing? And he said, I was creating, before even I created my businesses, I was creating the entrepreneur in me, the businessman in me, and I was creating the creator inside me, because I knew that this is who I'll be taking to the business. This is who I will be throughout in the creation. And he said, most people don't realize that the secret of what I am creating as success in my business is about the founding principles. And he said, it is the principles where I go back to, and it is the principles where I come from when I make any business decision. And that became my reference point. And, this reminds me of my own insight that, yes, unless business leaders change their thinking about marketing and business, and unless they change their perception that business and marketing is about manipulation, and yes, it is a manipulation, but in a very positive sense, in a very progressive. It's a manipulation to help people see what their pain points are, and to serve them the best of the solution with and that solution is coming from who we are as leaders, and the larger purpose that we have on this planet, in co-creating this as a solution to their pain points. And that's what even I have been very passionate about, Elisa. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And there is an interesting thing that I would really love to learn from you about your experience of manifesting, working with Paul McKenna. What was about that?
So maybe a couple of years ago, I started to really try to consciously tap into my intuition. So I was keeping an intuition journal so I could begin to bring more and more awareness to my intuition and hearing that voice rather than the noisy chatter of my mind. And so a few things happen, and I realized actually whenever I've had great success, it's because I've listened to the voice of intuition. And so, for example, I remember I did certified business coach 4 years ago with EverCoach as a student. And afterwards, and I immediately began to apply it and had success. So Ajit interviewed me for the EverCoach podcast. And I remember him saying to me at the time, he asked me a question like, like, what's the next step for you? And I said something like, I want to work with conscious companies and really amplify their impact. And I remember thinking right at that moment, a little voice dropped in my head and said, you're going to work with EverCoach one day. But I didn't listen to it. But then 3 years later, there I was now part of the team, part of the EverCoach team. So what I'm trying to do is get better at the listening and not ignoring it, because I think it, like, the universe will always bring you back on your path. Yes. But it's much easier to just listen in the first place and start walking rather than being pushed back on it every now and again. And so about a year ago, I was at an event where Paul McKenna was speaking, and I honestly, I love Paul McKenna so much because he's so humble and just a really, really nice guy. Really nice. Like, I had a chat with him on the stage, a quick one, and I said to him, because my mum loves Paul McKenna, and so I had to tell him that, because otherwise my mum would be she'd be upset. So I said, oh, Paul, I have to tell you that my mum loves you, blah, 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 blah. And then afterwards, at the end of the day, he came and found me and he said, let me record a little video for your mum on your phone. He's that nice. He's just lovely. And I remember on the train on the way home, I had this voice come in my head, and it said, you'll work with Paul McKenna one day. And so when I was recently at the Super Coach event in Tallinn, and which is 2 days, but I had to leave on the morning of the second day. And I knew Paul was going to be there, but I was hoping he would be there on the first day, the day that I was there, but he wasn't. He was going to be on the next day. So I was really disappointed, because I really wanted to manifest this conversation with Paul where I was going to tell him, I'm going to work with you one day. And then I was also due to speak on the stage on the Saturday, but for whatever reason, scheduling, it didn't happen. So the next morning, I had about an hour to squeeze in the morning, and I thought I can either go straight to the airport or I can squeeze in an hour at the Super Coach event. And I thought I'll do that. So I went there with my suitcase and like my traveling clothes. And when I got there in the morning, the organizer said, oh, if you're here, we're going to put you on first. Like, we want to put you on the stage so that you can talk. So I was standing at the back of the hall, and I knew, like, I literally had to run off straight after I'd spoken on stage. I had to grab my suitcase and go. I was standing in the back of the hall, and then I turned, like, literally no one else is there. There's all of the audience in front of me, and there's the stage over there, but I was standing right at the back in the sound deck. And I turned to my right, and Paul McKenna is standing right next to me. So I was able to have this conversation with him and tell him that I'm going to work with him one day, and all of this. And then I got called to go on the stage. So it turned out that he was right on after me. And then as I came off, I saw him again, and he asked me a few questions, and, oh, right, so you're in marketing, you've got a business background as well, so but anyway, for me, it was watering a seed that the universe had already planted, not my seed.
Wow.
So I don't, like, that will come to fruition at some point, I don't know, but I'm going to keep watering the seed by pestering Paul McKenna and reminding him that I shall work with him one day.
Fantastic. I don't know what so many coincidences in what you are speaking about and what I have been speaking. And the first thing is that you and my values are authenticity, service, and love. And just now when you spoke about watering the seeds, yesterday I was interviewed by Nicholas for his Giants and Smalls TV, and I said, when he asked me about this thing, I said the same thing. Desire is a seed planted by the universe, because the universe is intentional. It has planted a desire in you, and universe wants to create it through you, and it wants to see if you can be a great vehicle. And he asked me, how can one be a great vehicle for the universe? I said, by trusting the intuition, by trusting the voice that is speaking with you, and just taking the next smallest action, and just building the momentum enough by demonstrating your faith by taking action. And that is the only way. Your faith speaks with the universe, and when you listen to this voice that is speaking with you, you are listening to God's voice, you are listening to universe's voice. And universe, the more you trust it, the more universe gets, universe just wants the best of you, because universe wants the best for itself. And when you and that is what I call as surrendered action. And when you learn how to take surrendered action, and when you start creating from a surrendered action, universe knows where to take it, and how to direct it, and how to bring the resources and people, and bring everything to you. And it just happens like a magic. But there is a whole process of creation, and we are the co-creators in this process.
It's a really excellent. I love how you describe that, and it's such a humbling and exciting, and what an honor to have to be that. What an honor to be that co-creator.
Yes. Well, it was amazing to have this conversation with you, Elisa.
Likewise, thank you.
You are a great friend, and I love what you're creating.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you so much. And this was a conversation filled with profound insights, most importantly for business leaders to create business by being centered in their own being, and to focus more on creating a culture around their products, and be the solutions to the problems that people have in order for them to serve them.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Elisa.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us.
I'm moved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and namaste from India.
Namaste.